wait for the governor's directive there and hear from our own health officers. And for those people who have already paid or will pay, there will be some proration, because the assumption is that we're going to be opening later than usual. So there'll be some proration of reimbursements for fees they did pay. And just something to highlight there is we have to keep in mind that the Recreation Department pays about $200,000 a year to our seasonal staffers. So that provides a lot of money for kids who are home from college, et cetera, and even helps people with their groceries and everything else. So we have to keep those financial concerns in mind when we consider all the other things like assistance and proration, et cetera. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yeah, just briefly, I wanted to mention that the Arts Council has a program, So Many Masks, and you can pick up your packet and make masks to help the needy and get those everyone to have a nice mask. Not everyone is so inclined to put those together, but it's a nice program that they have. And I also just want to mention that if you're a business and you haven't been part of our Zoom calls every week on Thursdays, you can sign up for getting those emails by going to our website or the princetoncovid.org website and put your email in there so you're on our mailing list for our updates and newsletter as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Councilwoman Sachs?
Nope, nothing.
No, okay. I had a few announcements. The first one is I just want to thank all of our first responders and our frontline workers. We are so indebted to you each and every day of this crisis, and we thank you for your work. And the best way that each of us can help the people on the front lines is for us to stay at home. And if we do go out, to wear a mask or face covering. You heard from Councilwoman Pearl-Lambros, if you need a face covering, the Arts Council is working on that. And if you have the skill and inclination, there is a much greater need now for community masks or face masks. There have been some, there was a flurry of executive orders last week from the governor, and a bunch of those have to do with new regulations with face masks. So anybody who's riding on New Jersey Transit is now required to wear a face mask. Employers are required to supply their employees. Retail employers are required to supply their employees with both gloves and face coverings, and all customers are required to wear masks when shopping. The state has closed all state parks. The municipality is keeping our municipal parks open for the time being, but we are requesting that everybody who's using the parks also wear a face covering. And we're going to hear from our health officer when we get to reports. But one of the tips for the face coverings is you probably want more than one so that you can wash it after you've worn it. So it's a part of the new normal that we're gonna all have to get used to wearing them when we go outside. A couple additional announcements. There will be a public meeting, a virtual public meeting on on April 22nd, next Wednesday, regarding the municipality's new energy aggregation program. And you can find more information about that both on the municipal website, and it'll be posted on the virtual calendar at princetoncovid.org. And also I'll be holding my monthly Meet the Mayor on Friday, April 24th, between 8:30 and 10 a.m. And that will also be a virtual Meet the Mayor, and there'll be more details about that, how to log in and join that later this week. And are there any staff announcements? All right, I don't see any. So we'll move on to the award of recognition. We'll turn it over to Councilman Williamson. And I should say that for all of the awards that we're handing out virtually, we're planning to hand them out in real life once we can all get together again, so that you won't be shortchanged. But with that, I'll hand it over to Councilman Williamson to do this award.
Thanks, Mayor. Before I begin, just issue with the Zoom. I'm not sure if Mia, you have Eve's name. Is that some?
I know it. I'm
Okay.
here.
Okay, just okay. So for anyone watching, the real Eve Nieder gang is in the top right corner, and that's Councilwoman Mia Sachs in the bottom left corner. Okay, okay. Thank you again, Mayor. It is indeed an honor to recognize the Witherspoon Jackson Neighborhood Association, also known as the WJNA for short. It is a community-based organization located in the historic African-American and historic immigrant Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood in right here in our wonderful town, Princeton. Initially, it was under the leadership of the late James Floyd, former Princeton Township mayor, and actually the first African-American mayor of Princeton Township. The WJNA meets monthly to discuss issues important to the quality of life in the neighborhood and the entire municipality of Princeton. The WJNA consists of neighbors and business owners who work together to build community relationships, to keep people informed, and to advocate for equity and fairness in our approach to all critical areas of need. A primary concern and central objective of the organization is to assist in maintaining sustainable home ownership for the longstanding African-American homeowners and affordable housing opportunities for low-income families in the neighborhood. In 2019, the WJNA sponsored its first Welcome Weekend and welcomed the entire town of Princeton and neighboring communities to a weekend of neighborhood festivities of fun, entertainment, and history. And they plan to make this a successful event on an annual basis. Even though this is a corporate award, I would feel remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to certain individuals in particular that keeps the WJNA functioning. There are the co-conveners is the term I was asked to use, Chairman Leighton Newland and Mayor Yana Moore. And of course, there are others such as the great Shirley Satterfield, Bernadine Hines, Tommy Parker, and I'll mention it again only because he's my fraternity brother and who has passed on to what we Kappas call Chapter Invisible, the late great Mayor Jim Floyd. Thanks.
Thanks, Dwayne.
You're welcome.
And again, we'll be giving out that award in person. Hopefully when we, in the not too distant future, when we start to open things back up and are able to meet together in person. So now we come to the main item on tonight's agenda, which is the 2020 municipal budget. Council introduced the budget about a month ago now, but in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and what we're expecting to be the impact that we've already started to see on our economy, the council's decided to revisit the budget and to bring it back with no tax increase. The reason why we've been able to do that in a responsible way is because of the years of prudent fiscal planning that is in large part thanks to the efforts of our administrator, Mr. DeShield, Sandy Webb, our CFO, and of our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee that's led by Scott Sillers, who's here with us tonight. And just want to thank Scott on behalf of the council and the community for all the work you put in every year to help us put together a responsible budget and to think not just about this year's budget, but the impact it's going to have on future years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott to give a presentation, CFAC's presentation on the budget. And I know that you have some slides that we're going to try to get up on the screen for everybody to see.
Right. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. Just to start out, I'll start out as I start out all these presentations. The main focus that the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee takes with respect to the town's finances and its budgets is looking at things on a long-term basis. And we've kind of boiled those down into three policies that have worked well for the town and guide us going forward. The first of which is just a basic budget timetable that makes sure that we're establishing and creating the budget in a timely basis as well as possible, given that we're always at the mercy of what's going on with the economy and the state policy, but get that done on a way that we can permit us to have adequate discussion and timely adoption of the budget without having to hurry things more often, more so than need be. The second policy is a surplus policy, which basically just establishes amount of surplus, which is basically the cash cushion you've got in your bank accounts, your savings, and establishes that as a percent of our budgeted spending at 15 to 20% of budgeted spending. And the easiest way to look at that is that it's the cash that you need to operate without ever having to worry about getting into a crisis. And it basically represents just 3 or so months of our budget sitting in a bank account at all times. That's what it means. If we're at 15% of budgeted appropriation, that comes out to about 3 months worth of spending without having to take any revenue in. And that puts us in good stead with the rating agencies and results in us contributes to us having a AAA rating on our debt. Cheaper debt, always able to access the market, et cetera. The last policy is a capital and debt policy, which basically we're just making sure that our debt, which is about 15% of our overall budget, is incurred every year. We've got to pay it every year, year in and year out, and we want to make spend capital in a fashion that the debt that's incurred for capital spending, when we're obligated to pay that debt back over time, that it is within the realm of what we anticipate on a budget year in, year out. And the back of the envelope we use on that is if we limit the growth in debt service to 1.5% per year, it's going to grow right in line with potentially the rest of the budget items out there, salaries, all the other spending items. It's going to grow with inflation as far as the cost of the capital maintenance that we have to do. And it's going to keep our tax levy increases in line with what's sustainable. Turning that to the budget now. Turning to the budget now. This budget, it's just a summary of the many lines that go into the budget. It reflects the revisions that have been made to the budget for 2020 to reduce the municipal tax levy so that it's equal with last year. Last year's tax levy for the municipality was 49.3 cents. We had anticipated an increase to 50.1 cents, which is a little bit over $600,000, which we took out of the budget, as you see here, reducing the municipal levy to $35.5 million, $141,000 change over last year. And all that is it represents the increase in the ratables that can be assigned part of the tax burden and results in the tax levy being the same as last year at 49.3 cents. We paid for this reduction in taxes through, number one, acknowledging that there's some line items in the budget that are going to be lower as a result of the shutdown in the economy. Those largely being things like road work, some insurance monies, salt because we didn't really have a winter this year. And we're also going to have a reduction in other revenues, mainly court revenues as a result of the shutdown, and parking revenues as a result of the shutdown. Those are all funded with, all those changes are funded with an increase in the amount that was to be appropriated. We increased that amount by, I think, $200,000. So we have it, we're now drawing, no, $400,000. We're now going to draw $7.2 million out of surplus for 2020. The other notable item was debt service and cash capital. I'll go into why we're spending so much on cash capital this year and so little on debt later in the presentation. But in order to reduce in order to make the budget all balance out, we reduced the amount of cash capital that we're going to use from I think 1.8 million to 1.5 million. Is that right? 1.8, 1.5. Yes. And that is largely going to be funded by the fact that capital spending is going to be lower this year than we anticipated. Now, just looking long term for a moment here, and getting back to why it's so easy for us to accommodate these changes is because, as the mayor said, we've done a great job, and that includes council present and council past, in maintaining discipline over spending, such that we've got here a comparison of what has happened since consolidation with the municipal tax rate versus what's happened with the inflation rate. And this is both are pegged at 2012 being a value of 100, and that's the increase that's occurred in the CPI and an increase that's occurred in the tax rate since then. In 2013, we realized savings as a result of consolidation, and we passed that right on through to the taxpayers. And it wasn't until 2015 that we were back up at the level that we had been prior to consolidation and what the tax rate was. And we maintained a rate below inflation since then. Looking at the pieces and where that comes from, first looking at the revenue side of our budget, the pie chart at the top shows the relative importance of each part of the revenue picture. The largest piece being municipal tax, it's 51% of the budget. All other items not mentioned in the table is 19%. Sewer is 11%. Princeton University pilot is about 5%. And you can see it's all very small pieces compared relative to the municipal tax. Down at the bottom, the graph down at the bottom shows how things have changed since from 2013, our first budget, up to 2020. The Princeton University pilot has increased by 5% a year, and that was negotiated to do so. Municipal taxes have gone up 1% overall. Total revenues have gone up 0.9%, and CPI has gone up 2% on average. So we've managed to hold municipal tax less than CPI and held it to a reasonable level, particularly when you look at all other items that we have where we've lost revenue, has declined by 1% per year. On the appropriations side, same picture, appropriation pie chart up the top. You can see that salary and health benefits are 37% of our spending. Debt and cash capital is about 18%, pensions 5%, and all others 40%. And down at the bottom, you can see how those various pieces of our budget have contributed to the increase in spending over the years. We got 9.9% total growth in appropriation, 1.2% growth in in salaries and health benefits, which I think is a real tribute to us being very disciplined on hiring. We benefited from, a top-heavy workforce when consolidation started as far as salary and wages gone, and retirees have been replaced with new workers that are at the lower end of the wage scale right now. They're moving up gradually through that. We've also outsourced some of the more expensive items that came along. I'm thinking of dispatch, when that was starting to grow at an unwanted level, we outsourced that to control spending more in line with what the long-term tax growth of 1% to 2% could handle. We have no control over pension. That's basically state-run, and the only way we can control that is by our head count, and that takes years and years to translate into dollars and cents savings. So that's the largest increase in our spending overall. And this here is a graph of how surplus policy has translated over the years. Our budget has increased, and as a result, surplus has grown modestly. We've maintained surplus at about 15% of budgeted appropriation over the years, and will continue to do so. It's very tough to manage on a year in, year out basis. So like in 2017, we had a big jump in it because in 2017, we wound up not spending as much money as we budgeted to spend. And we took that capital surplus and plowed it right back into cash capital in one particular year. Put it right back to use in the budget. I spoke of the debt service and how that's reflected in our spending over time. We had the blue line represents a 1.5% growth in our core debt service. And when I speak of core debt service, I'm talking about the debt that has to be paid for with municipal taxes. We've got a modest amount of debt that gets paid for with sewer fees. There's debt that gets paid for with parking revenues and the like. But the debt that has to be paid for straight from the taxpayers, that's plotted out there, the blue line, at what 1.5% per year would be. And we knew at consolidation that we had an obligation in debt service, a contractual obligation going forward that was going to force us to be above that line for a while. And we took care of that by using some reserves to fund that gap. And starting in 2020, our contractual debt service has fallen off dramatically this year, such that we are well below that 1.5% line. And what we did as a result was we used that gap between the required debt service that was going to be spent in 2020 and that 1.5% growth line. We took that money and we are using that revenue to pay for capital directly with cash instead of bonding for it. So it's getting wiped out early. It's never going to be in debt. It's a great way to keep our capital the drag of capital on our annual current fund budget consistent year in, year out. And it will result, it basically accrues to all future budgets by spending that now. Here's capital spending by year since consolidation. It has been lower than anticipated in recent years. There's a number of reasons for that, but it's very difficult to manage on a year in, year out basis, and it is starting to drive our debt service lower. It looks to us like the capital need is still there. It's just not being, the capital projects are not being executed as quickly as as the debt service is falling off. So, it's potential that that'll go up significantly in future years. But because we spent the cash on so much of our cash on capital right now, it will minimize its impact on future debt service. Now, just going back to the overall tax rates, and just what kind of impact we have on the taxpayers' wallet year in, year out. We all know full well that the municipality only represents about 1/5 of the total tax bill, with the schools representing about 50% and the county representing about 30%. The graph down at the bottom of that slide shows what has happened in the trend in the cumulative tax rate over time. This just goes out through 2019. It shows that we are virtually flat at the municipal level, and the increase is gradually coming through as a result of increased municipal and county taxes. On the right-hand side, it's just a reflection of the 2019 average residential tax bill on the assessment of $838,000 for the average municipal residential assessment. The municipal tax bill portion was $4,277. It will be the same amount this year. If the schools and county are the same as this year, their numbers will be the same. If they go up, it'll be more. But in order for us to get to the 49.3 cents, I believe it was, from the 50 cent, we cut our spending by our taxes by about $600,000. That translates into, for the average assessment, a reduction in the tax bill of just $78. So it has what we do on the margin has very, very little effect on the tax bill. And it will, most assuredly, that savings will be taken by increase in school spending and potentially county spending. Lastly, just looking at our collection base and consideration of what is their concern of what this recession is potentially going to do to our collections going forward. Number one, we're a very heavily residential community. Hardly anybody else in the area has 63% of their assessed value, taxable assessed value, as residential. In more places, it's far more commercial. And commercial is the one that's more volatile in assessed values. So we'll be a little bit immune, to use a bad word, from the volatility in assessments going forward. They potentially will be less on our tax base. When we look back at what happens to collection rates over the years through the Great Recession, they dropped from 99% total collection down to 98%, a little bit less than 98% by 2011. And by 2014, they were back up to 99, almost 99.5%. So you're talking about 1 to 1.5%, which is about $1.7 million in lower collection of the overall tax bill. When we go out to collect the tax bill, we're collecting for both the county and the schools, and whatever's not collected, the municipality has to fund. So we're out of pocket whatever we paid over to them until we collect it from the taxpayer. Ultimately, the town collects 100% of its taxes. It's just a question of time to get the money through delinquency, usually through people catching up with their tax bills. but we've had very, very little problem in the past with collections impacting our surplus or our budgets. And that's the end of the presentation. So take any questions.
Great, thanks, Scott. I just wanted to jump in. There's been a question that a lot of the elected officials have been receiving, and just wanted to let folks who are watching right now know that there's been some movement to delay certain tax filing deadlines. And right now, the next deadline for property taxes is May 1st. There's a 10-day grace period that the town honors. We are not able to extend the grace period without enabling legislation from the state. The Assembly passed a bill last week, A3902, which would allow municipalities to further extend the grace period another 30 days, so for a total of 40 days. And right now that bill is pending in the Senate. And so we will continue to track that. And if we need to, if we're able to take action as a council, that would come back to us at a future meeting. But right now, we're not able to extend the grace period unless the legislature gives us the ability to do so. But I'm going to thank Scott for his presentation and for the work that went into it, and see if there's anybody on council who has any questions. I can't see everybody, so if you can raise your virtual hand, it'd be easier to call on folks.
Do you want me to turn this off?
Oh yeah, why don't you turn off the screen for now? That'd be easier to see people.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have a question for Scott? Okay, yep, Ms. Niedergang.
Scott, thank you so much. That was super helpful and informative. I just wanted to pick up a little bit what the mayor had said about the fact that Princeton itself does not have the ability to extend tax deadlines. I did have a conversation with our administrator this afternoon in which I asked that question and was told that basically if you can't pay your taxes on time, there are interest and penalties assessed through the course of a year. So even if you do fall behind, if they're even if enabling legislation is not passed or the enabling legislation does not cover you for the entire time, you do have a full year before any further action is taken against your property, as I understand it, except for interest and penalties. So that may be some consolation, but I would urge people to reach out to their state senators and tell them that this bill is important to you. It's always important for people to hear, for representatives to hear from their constituents. That does have an effect. So, but thank you again, Scott.
Is there anybody with any other questions for Scott?
Mayor, if I can?
Yep.
We did get one question that asked, and I'm going to ask Scott actually to put back up one of the screens that showed the entire budget, the 2002, I think it was the second slide that showed the comparisons of the 2 years. You could?
There you go.
Thank you. Just wanted to give, someone wanted to see it again, just give them an opportunity.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to read some of these comments into the record too that we're getting on the Q&A. So JP Johnson Jr., can you please show again or state the size of the total 2020 budget versus the 2019 budget? So that's shown up here. And then Kip Cherry used the Q&A function to say, congratulations on using cash instead of debt to finance some purchases. that will save taxpayers money. Maybe I missed it, or should I know it, but what does CPI stand for?
Consumer Price Index.
Great. And I just want to take a moment here. If people who are tuning in have a question or comment, they can use the Q&A feature that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And I saw that Councilwoman Perrin-Lambros had her hand up. If you have a question for Scott.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Scott. That was really very comprehensive, and it was really comforting to see that last comparison part. We hadn't really talked about that in the CFAC, but to see the comparison with 2008 and the recession, and that the collection rates were pretty similar, because we've been talking about, you know, the concern for what happens next year. I don't know though if there was a big, back in 2008, if there was a big shrinking of the tax assessment, and that of course is something we, you know, want to watch, because if the bottom falls out and real estate prices, you know, drop considerably, I guess we can look at some of the capital projects and what we can cut. But I think we were able to get to the zero tax increase really just through cutting some operational budget and really not holding back on too much in terms of capital works, maybe a few road projects. But could you just elaborate on that? Because we talked about that in committee, but we really didn't go into
I'm sorry. The question is?
We don't really, we were able to get to the zero tax increase without actually having to cut in terms of any long-term projects. We were able to do that within that operational budget. Is that correct?
We did not look at the capital budget.
Right, that's my point. Okay.
We had, and we would typically, the capital budget would require, I think in 2020, we anticipated that we would spend $500,000 on cash capital.
Mm-hmm.
If capital spending changes, typically it would, its impact would be felt in future budgets as it got bonded for, that capital spending got bonded for and then turned around and had to be paid as debt service. We are spending about $1.8 million additional this year on cash capital in lieu of bonding for it. So capital projects, if we spend $8 million on capital this year, we'll pay $1,925,000 of that with out of the current fund. In a normal year, that would just be $400,000 or $500,000.
Okay.
We reduced the amount of that cash capital by a couple $100,000 in order to balance the budget. So in some sense, yes, we are not anticipating spending as much on capital out of the current fund budget as we did before. How much that is in reality is almost impossible to tell, because we have a number of projects that are underway right now, spending that is underway that is necessarily going to be delayed as a result of the shutdown.
Right.
How much of that is reduced capital spending this year or not? I don't know. Nobody knows at this point.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to make the point that we do have, I think, two areas, both the surplus as well as capital, spending, where we could look at if, again, the budget, if the bottom were to drop out. But, I think it was really good to see the comparison, and I hadn't seen that before, of what happened the last recession that we had. And I really appreciate you bringing that to light. Because
Michelle, we're in a very, very good spot as far as flexibility goes, because we anticipated spending so much cash on capital, and our surplus is at such a good level that moderation in either of those amount can be used very easily relative to trying to keep the tax rate within a certain level.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. And I know we're good. We want to keep our AAA rating as well, which is really important because we're going into affordable housing and all
Right.
other construction. So I think we're in good shape. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. It's my,
Great. Hey, Mark, just based on Councilwoman Pearl Lambros's question, can you just review where we are with the budget schedule now?
Sure.
So when this will be coming back for adoption and when we'll have our capital budget? Oops, you're on mute.
This will be coming back for adoption. We'll have to re-advertise on the agenda. There are a number of amendments that will bring us down to the zeros. Those amendments will be re-advertised in the paper. We'll have another public hearing at the next council meeting on the 27th, and that's when we'll have the adoption of the budget. Prior to that, we'll have reviewed our capital budget for capital approvals, and at that point, we'll be looking to do bond ordinance at either the next meeting or subsequent meetings after that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Cohen, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit on what Michelle was saying. I noticed that while your chart about our record of collections during the Great Recession, went all the way back, you didn't have anything about actual revenues going back that far. And I'm wondering, it sort of relates to her question about what if assessments go down because the values of the residential properties go down. Were you involved at that time to know what kind of shortfalls we actually had in revenues above and beyond the difficulty we had with collections at that time? And I know you said that residential properties tend to be a little bit insulated from swings in the economy versus commercial, but still they are vulnerable. So I wonder if you can comment on that.
Well, I just point out that the municipal reassessment was, I believe, 2010. And at that time, the assessed values of properties went up by, I think it was 30% or more. So in the midst of all that recession chaos, we also changed our baseline. And a lot of people got higher tax bills as a result of that. Some people, particularly at the higher end of residential values, did not see their assessments go up as much, and so their tax bill went down relative to the people in the middle. So the reassessment kind of clouded all that. But just based on my recollection, I don't think that the Princeton assessment pool really was impacted by the last recession. Maybe it slowed down some additions to some new builds, but I don't recall values going down. This might be a different recession from that, so who knows? But my thinking would be, if property values go down, commercial, they're going to probably go down in unison, maybe more than residential. But residential, if they go down, they're probably going to go down in unison also.
Yeah, and if I can follow up with that, Scott, the tax collection rate back then was at around 99%. So we really did not see any changes during that time period, even though it also included the reval.
Thanks, Sandy. And for people who are watching, that's Sandy Webb, who's our CFO. Ms. Sachs, did you also have something you wanted to add? You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
So actually, just while we were talking my phone just buzzed, and the New York Times says, lifting stay-at-home orders won't make the economy roar back. Data suggests the economy will recover slowly even after limits are eased. And I, it was really great to see your presentation, Scott, and to have affirmation of how hard everyone in the municipality has worked to make the budget the healthy entity that it is now. But I can see where there are places where, for example, in the IT department, where we need to focus some financial resources. And I guess my message is, it's great that we're in a healthy place, but I don't think we should take it for granted. And everyone in the community needs to do their part, and that includes the schools and other. We may be in for some belt tightening, and I also want to echo I think what the governor said last week, which is that people who can pay their taxes and don't need to delay should pay their taxes, because that helps the overall health of the economy. And I also just want to remind everyone that the municipal budget is only 22%. It's 22 cents on the dollar of the whole pie, and we are just the pass-through for collecting for other entities. I just want to make sure that we continue to work to keep to respect all the work by the elected officials who went before us and staff to make the budget the healthy budget that it is today. So that was very long-winded, but that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Are there any other, David, is your hand still up, or is that from before? No, okay. Any other comments from council? Okay, well, thank you very much, Scott. That was,
You're welcome.
as always, very informative and helpful. So thank you.
Can I just add a quick note, Mayor? I assume that presentation will be up on the municipal website for people to look at it at their leisure,
It's already there.
which I intend to do. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's actually, if you go on the website, if you go under the finance department, you can see the financial documents dating back for several years, and you can look at the old Citizens Finance Advisory Committee newsletter, the budget, the CFAC presentation, all of that. So you can really dig down deep if you want to trace things back over the past several years. And we'll be putting up the 2020 information as it gets done. Okay, next we're going to hold the public hearing of the 2020 municipal budget. And just to put the framework around this, we're holding the public hearing because the budget was introduced, but as has been presented tonight, we are going to be amending it with the next resolution. But still, if there's anybody who would like to comment as part of this public hearing, there are two ways to do that. The first is if you are watching this on a computer, then you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit a comment. If you have dialed in to listen to this meeting by telephone, you can email your questions to Princeton comment. This is the wrong address, Mark. Remind me what it is. I'm reading off the old one, which was incorrect. Is it
Princeton comments with an X.
Is it Princeton comments or public comments?
I'm sorry, public comments
Public comments
at gmail.com.
gmail.com. So that's, I'm going to say it again. It's public comments at gmail.com. And we have somebody who's monitoring that account. And
If I may, Mayor, we do have two questions coming from the Gmail account.
Okay.
For the public hearing. The first question that we have is from Chowdhury Balterman, and he asks, my income as a small business owner has come to zero. I'm sure this is the case for most citizens and organizations. Can you please let me know what you're going to do to cut property taxes for the rest of the year?
Oh.
The next one I have is from Mary Procasino. And she asked the question, what is council going to do about collecting taxes on May 1st? A lot of people who own their homes are out of work and unable to pay their taxes. Will there be penalties if they pay?
Okay, so
First can answer.
I can take the second question first. Can everybody mute themselves though, because I'm getting feedback. Okay, so so for the second question, I stated at the beginning that right now the municipality offers a 10-day grace period. There's currently legislation that's pending in the Senate that would allow us to extend that to 40 days. We're waiting. We don't have the statutory authority to enact that on our own without this enabling legislation from the state legislature. So I had heard yesterday that the vote was expected today. I've been looking and it doesn't seem like there's been any action. So it might be on the docket for tomorrow. We're keeping a close eye on that. And if we do have the legislation that comes through, we'll be taking that up. I assume that then we would need a accompanied resolution from council to extend the grace period. And that would be definitely something, if we're allowed to, that we would bring to council. And we understand the concern and want to be able to offer whatever relief we're able to. I'll make an attempt at answering the first question, and anybody else who wants to chime in can. We are amending our budget tonight to keep taxes flat. As you heard as part of Mr. Siller's presentation, there's 3 components of your property tax bill, and the municipality makes up just one portion of that. Each of those groups need to do their part. And the unfortunate truth is that cutting taxes to the point where that's going to make a significant difference to you and not grind the government to a halt it's not really realistic. When we consolidated, we made major structural changes, and that resulted in a 3.5% tax decrease that year. But that was only on the municipal portion of the tax bill, and it was actually dwarfed by increases at the county and school district level. So I would encourage you, if you haven't been participating, to participate in the Thursday forum for businesses that Councilwoman Perrin-Lambros mentioned. There are federal programs and state programs that we want to help you get linked up to that will provide relief. And that's probably going to be your best bet to get the help that you're going to need to get you over this hump. But we are very aware of the difficult situation a lot of our businesses find themselves in. And we do want to be a resource for you to make sure that you get connected to help that might be available that you're eligible for.
Can I add something in on that?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to respond to, we're putting together a group from SCORE of mentors, and they're very agile in telling what kinds of programs are out there, very familiar with. There's such a maze right now, various programs from the SBA, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and others, the PPL, and how to actually find the best strategy and the best situation for you personally. So if you reach out to me, I can direct you and connect you via email with SCORE. The Princeton Merchants Association has that on their website. And of course, we have our call on Thursday, but I know time is of the essence, so feel free
I
to.
just lost audio. Wait.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And then Ms. Niedergang and Mr. Cohen.
Sorry, I didn't have a comment.
Okay. Mr. Cohen, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to mention, this is in regard to the second question. The homeowner was concerned about property taxes. I've been involved with a weekly call convened by the Senior Resource Center. One of the topics of conversation has been a fund, a COVID emergency relief fund set up by Princeton Children's Fund and several other agencies, but it's being administered by the Children's Fund to provide financial relief to people who have had a loss of income as a result of COVID-related layoffs. Mostly, to my knowledge, that's been going to renters so far. I don't really know what their policy is going to be related to homeowners, but I think that that's something that's worth looking into as well. Go to the Princeton Children's Fund.org website, and they have a link there for applying for assistance. And it's possible that, unless one of the other council members knows that homeowners are explicitly excluded, I think it's worth following up as a possible resource.
Great, thank you. Yep, Ms. Fraga?
And I will have to look and see whether there's anything specific related to homeowners, but I know primarily they've been working with landlords. Actually, there's several landlords who have agreed to accept just 50% of the rent. And that's one way that they're working in assisting with rental payments, but also with utilities. But I will follow up and look. I haven't heard of assisting homeowners with, if you're referring to mortgages, that's not something that I've heard that that's one of the options, but I will follow up and let you know.
All right, are there any other comments as part of the public hearing? Have you gotten any additional emails in since we've opened this discussion?
We have not, Mayor.
Okay, all right. In that case, I'm going to, do we close this public hearing or do we just continuing it to the next meeting?
You'll close the public hearing and then you're going to introduce the amendments.
Okay, all right, so we're going to close the public hearing, and we have the amendment, which is 2155, resolution to amend the 2020 municipal budget. And is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll
Moved
second.
by Ms. Pearl-Lambros and seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Are there any further comments on this? Before we vote, I do want to thank Mr. DeShield and our CFO, Sandy Webb, and members of CFAC for responding quickly to the crisis that we're in, to come back with a budget that's both responsible and that meets the new goals that we set in light of this crisis. So I want to thank you all for getting this back to us quickly. And with that,
Mayor, if I can interrupt before you
Yep.
continue. Just real quick, we had a change in the assessed value from Neil Snyder. A slight change from the numbers that he gave me last week when this was prepared. So it's going to impact our reserve for uncollected taxes and our amount to be raised by just a couple of dollars. But I did want to mention that since we are amending this budget. So the numbers are going to be just slightly different than what you are currently looking at.
so how do we deal with that? Should we correct those numbers before we vote on it tonight, or just?
No, I think you
revisit it?
can go ahead and introduce it with these couple of added changes that I'll make tomorrow morning.
Okay. Is Trishka still on? How do you want us to phrase the motion then?
Yeah, I'm concerned because this is a resolution to amend the budget. This is not an ordinance. We're not going to be hearing we're not going to have future discussion of this resolution. So I think we might.
Andy, can you just go back over what the corrections were that you mentioned?
Okay, yeah, I hope you have your seatbelt on because this is something here. The reserve for uncollected taxes is going down by $1.67. the amount to be raised by taxes is going down by $1.67. And there's a slight change to the open space of $63. So the three of those are all of the changes that are going to be incorporated into this amendment.
Okay, I think you can move the amendment with the 3 changes that Sandy just placed on the record.
Okay, so is there a motion to move the resolution with those 3 changes?
Yeah, so I'll move
Move.
the amendment with those changes.
Okay, so moved by Ms. Curran-Lambros.
I'll second.
And seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Can this be a voice vote or do we need to do the roll call?
Roll call.
Roll call, all right, but please call the roll.
Ms. Peron-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
Okay, and the resolution passes unanimously. And we will be holding a second public hearing at our next meeting, which is scheduled for April 27th, Monday night. And now we come to the public comment portion of the meeting. And this is for to make a comment or ask a question for an item that's not already on the agenda. So just to review, there are 2 ways to make a comment. So you can either click the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen or send an email. And I just want to make sure we're giving out the right address here. So the agenda says princetoncomments@gmail.com.
Yes, that's what I got from
Okay.
the attorney. So if that's not it, then I need to
That's
correct.
correct. I'm sorry, that is correct.
Okay. So it's princetoncomments@gmail.com.
Correct.
Okay, if anybody has a comment or question for an item that's not already on the agenda, or you can press the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. All right, and seeing no public comment, we'll move on to reports. And since we have our health officer here tonight, Jeff Grosser, I'd like to give him an opportunity to brief council on what's happening in terms of our COVID-19 response. This was another difficult day with another death as a result of the disease. And I do want to thank Jeff and the entire health department for really doing an outstanding job. Just the amount of information coming to the health department, the amount of contact tracing you guys are doing. It's really been a huge service to the community. So I want to thank you for that and turn things over to you to give council an update on where things stand.
Thank you, Mayor. We good on hearing me? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good.
So I want to provide everybody an update on Princeton's situation on the COVID-19 response since last Monday when we last spoke. Princeton now stands at 62 confirmed cases. Mercer County has 1,646 cases, and the state of New Jersey has 64,584 cases. Unfortunately, as Mayor Lempert just mentioned, we were notified of a 3rd resident that passed away from COVID-19. The resident was the 2nd individual to come into COVID-19 from the Princeton Care Center. Princeton Health Department has been working closely with Princeton Health Care Center on managing their ongoing outbreak, which is now up to 5 total cases and 3 currently being active. Although the investigation is obviously still ongoing, we're receiving support and guidance from the New Jersey Department of Health, who has assigned an epidemiologist specializing in long-term care facilities to this case. And unfortunately, in this particular circumstance, it appears that from early diagnosis, it looks like transmission could have been a result from a asymptomatic, some type of asymptomatic spread. So we've been assisting Princeton Care Center with updating their infectious disease response plan to reflect all these new ongoing guidance and protocols for the novel coronavirus. Because this guidance is actively and rapidly changing, policies and procedures by facilities are changing regularly, we're trying to make sure that the Princeton Care Center has what they need to implement these things based upon their day-to-day operations. Some of these things include developing and implementing best practices for isolation of patients, which they're currently doing in a separate wing of the facility, as well as caring for staff who are treating those residents to make sure that they're not reinfecting anyone else. They've been implementing the New Jersey Department of Health guidance on outbreak response, and Princeton Health Department is actively assisting the care center with each new identified case and each new policy being implemented. Currently in New Jersey, there's 324 long-term care facilities that have at least one COVID-19 case, and there's currently 5,264 cases of COVID-19 in those 324 facilities. So think about that for a second. 5,200 cases, roughly, out of 64,000 in the entire state, in one of our most vulnerable populations to this disease. So it's unfortunately, taking advantage of long-term care centers, and we're doing our best from a contact tracing standpoint, as best as possible from a local health department standpoint. We've also been working very closely with retailers over the last week, implementing new procedures to come into compliance with the recent executive orders from Governor Murphy, which requires masking of all individuals, both working and shopping at these essential businesses, as well as occupancy limitations. I want to give a lot of kudos to some of the retailers that are doing a great job with the occupancy limits. I know it's not easy. Typically, you have to pull staff off the floor to count at the door and then count as they enter and as they leave. I also want to say that other residents and Arts Council have been extremely helpful in the support of sewing cloth face coverings for some of these locations. A big shout out to our Princeton Health Department registered environmental health specialist, Bob English, who just came aboard. And he's been working alongside these business owners to make sure that their locations are protecting both the staff and the shoppers. The residents have also been extremely helpful with donating over 4,000 surgical masks and homemade cloth masks for first responders and other people in need. The masks are being distributed to retailers who initially could not find enough for staff, and for residents who don't have the means to purchase them for themselves, and for individuals requiring quarantine or isolation and are concerned over exposure to their families or other individuals in their household. We've seen cloth face coverings become more of a social norm than I could have ever imagined. We need to remind residents that wearing a mask protects your fellow community members, and we need to make sure that we're doing so. Although public health entities state that symptomatic COVID-19 patients will most likely be the ones to spread the virus, I can definitely attest to the fact that we've seen asymptomatic spread in town. And this is more concerning because more often than not, that individual is spreading the virus and obviously does not know they're doing so. This is a huge kind of a weakness on the human part and a strength on the virus's part to maintain itself in the community. And we need to make sure that we're smarter than that. And the mask is one of the best ways we can defend against that. I also have to give a shout out to the Princeton School District. They've been extremely supportive. Liz Divich and Lisa Goldsmith, both school nurses with the Princeton School District, have supported our efforts by performing contact and tracing of confirmed COVID-19 patients in town. As discussed by former CDC Director and New York City Health Commissioner Tom Frieden, finding those that have been in contact with infected people is one of the key ways to stop the spread of COVID-19. And it'll likely be a large action item moving forward with Princeton's return to normalcy after the pandemic and Princeton's continuing fight to beat infectious disease. Some of the other things we've seen through the pandemic is the community's response to bring one another together. We've also been contacted by Princeton Seminary, who is providing housing support for healthcare workers and those that are required to quarantine or isolate and don't have enough space in their homes to adequately do so. A big thank you goes out to them for helping residents find a place where not many other housing options are available and not many other people want to take them in. Regarding OEM operations, I know there's been a lot of talk of how is this all being organized, and with the passing of Princeton's existing emergency management director, Bob Gregory, early in 2020, Princeton had the potential to be at a great disadvantage here to the lack of central emergency management leadership. And Chief Sutter with the police department has been steadfast in filling in as OEM coordinator, or he was formerly deputy, but I guess he's probably been knighted to deputy or to official coordinator at this point for the pandemic. I'm beginning to think that if you put Chief in charge of just about any type of emergency, he'll probably be able to lead you through it. But I just want to make sure mayor and council and the general public realize how fortunate we are to have him in Princeton. There's been a lot of discussion through the county in other towns about communications. And I can tell you that it has not been an issue with Chief Sutter helping us from the health department standpoint, allowing us to do the work that we need to do with public health. So I've really appreciated his teamwork. And I'll finish with one last thing here. Each day from members of the community, we'll get calls from residents just asking, when do we see this thing ending in Princeton? And first, I really appreciate the residents' vote of support, and I guess their thought that maybe I could tell them something that they can't find online. I love those types of phone calls. The truth is, I don't know when, but I do know that there's two things that really will get us to the point where we see this thing ending. And it's not going to be the economy. It's not going to be somebody coming out and saying, "Oh, we've officially reached the top of the peak here. We've flattened the curve." When we start to see testing take off, you're going to start to see things turn around. When we can test widespread people in a short period of time, we're going to save lives. For instance, with Princeton Care Center right now, if we had the ability to test people before the shift and find out whether or not they currently have COVID, they wouldn't work and they wouldn't have the possibility to transmit this. But the truth of the matter is that testing is not available right now. It's becoming available, but it's not available widespread. And that's going to really help out from a disease transmission standpoint. Fundamentally, a rapid test would tell the worker if they're infected with the virus and able to spread it to others. And this would go for other workers as they attempt to return to work. Testing to determine if you have the virus currently, which is also known as a serology testing, would let you know whether or not you had it and a better picture of kind of where this outbreak is going. Fortunately, we have some local leaders like Rutgers who created the first saliva-based COVID-19 test that was just recently approved by the FDA. That'll begin use, I guess, in Edison by the end of the week. The other item that I'm talking about that'll lead to exponential improvements through this pandemic is adequate contact tracing. You hear a lot about us talking about contact tracing, and in Princeton, we are so fortunate that we have members of the community that won't only contact trace and assist us with social distancing. They'll call out other people and say, "Hey, I saw so-and-so and they didn't seem to wear a mask," and they'll do it very respectfully, but they do it in a way where they're truly concerned over spread of disease in town. And that makes it easier for us. And that's why in Mercer County, I know testing's not the best in the community and throughout the state, but in Mercer County, our disease threshold with regards to clusters of cases is actually relatively low. And I believe that's one of the reasons why. But contact tracing for us at the health department is one of the best ways to stop future clusters and other outbreaks. And if we think back to our first contact tracing we did for COVID-19 back in early March, Princeton had 14 individuals tied back to a single event, which took 2 staff approximately 8 business days to go through all 200 or so contacts that they had since that party and since we were notified that they had that exposure. So if you multiply that times as many cases as we have now, you're looking at an army of people doing this contact tracing, which is one of the reasons why the school nurses have been so valuable. And moving forward, if we have rapid testing available, you don't have that backlog of 5 or 6 or 7 days where, fortunately we're in a time where people are social distancing, but say they're not, and they're going to work, they're going to school, that contact tracing can take a tremendous amount of time. So we're very fortunate in Princeton that people are abiding by social distancing. And, we want to encourage people to continue to do so. And I really applaud, mayor and council, Councilwoman Perrin Lambros with regards to the notifications that are going to the papers, getting the word out to people, Councilwoman Fraga, getting out to communities that, I think sometimes are unspoken for. I can't say enough about the efforts that everybody's taken here. And, I am a player for all of you guys. So, you let me know what I need to do and I'll go do it. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job with it. And obviously the news that we found out today that we lost a 3rd Princeton resident is the ultimate, anti-motivator with regards to what we're doing. But in the same sense, it actually motivates me even more to make sure that we can do more to save more people. And, I look to all of you for guidance on that. And I just want to let you know that I'll, keep working for you guys, and any questions you have or comments we need about getting the word out to make sure the community knows more, please let me know. And I'm happy to do whatever I can to make sure people know what we can do to get through this. So thank you again for tonight. And like I said, I'll take any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. There's 2 comments. David has a comment, and then Eve is next, and then
Yeah.
Leticia.
Mine is more of a question, Jeff. You were referring to the practice of counting customers going into stores and leaving stores. And I've noticed, at different times when I've been at McCaffrey's where the parking lot has looked equally full to me, but there was a line one day and there wasn't a line another day. And I'm just wondering, what's the criteria? What are they trying to accomplish with the counting in terms of a density of customers in the store or whatnot?
Now, I'll go back through, I guess, the executive order. One of the original guidances was, I believe, 50% of occupancy. So they're looking for essentially creating space between one another. Now, I don't know fire code and I don't know what 100% occupancy gives you in terms of square footage and people in that store. But I'm assuming from a 50% occupancy rate, it provides a minimum of that 6-foot distance between each person, if they actually keep that 6-foot distance between themselves. The other thing you'll see in stores is when you go to queue in line, you'll see hopefully signage on the floor regarding where to stand, just to give people that 6-foot distance. So that's what the occupancy rate is supposed to deliver to people, to make sure that there aren't more people in the store than what this space provides.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for everything you're doing. I know how hard you're working and how seriously you take this really important task. And to everyone who's assisting in this, just our heartfelt thanks. We are really lucky to have you. So I have a comment and a question. So the question is about a death that I read about on Facebook. Apparently a famous mathematician at the university whose name I hadn't heard of, but who died apparently at home. And I understood that he lived in Princeton. So I know that in various places I've read that in New York, for example, people that die at home are not being included in these numbers. And so I wonder if you're aware of this death and if maybe he lived in Princeton, but not here in Princeton. Everything from New Brunswick to Lawrence is Princeton. So I guess I'm asking if you know about that particular incident and if he did indeed live in Princeton. And then secondly, could we be overlooking other, deaths or hospitals or anything that maybe aren't going into the statistics? And then I'm just going to throw in my second comment for you to address what I've read, and I know that Councilwoman Sachs brought this up as well, that when people are exerting themselves, running, jogging, biking, that the 6-foot distance in terms of how particles are distributed is really not adequate. And just being out in the neighborhood, not today because it was raining, but walking around, I see a lot of people running or biking. And I'm wondering what we can do to encourage those people to make sure, since they are potential risk factors for others, that they know that they need to use masks when they're exercising. Thank you.
Great question. So the first one, I heard about that too, about the unfortunate death of, I believe it was Mr. Conway, I believe. I believe it was one of those other Princetons from what I had initially gathered. In terms of death reporting, it can be tricky based upon an individual's residency. If they have occupancy, or I'm sorry, if they have residency in both two towns, two municipalities, so they might have had a house in Princeton, but then also were in a long-term care facility somewhere else, but had dual residency. Somebody has to essentially take that individual's death certificate and put it on the certificate. So it's whether they died in the long-term care facility or they died in the residence. It depends on the long-term care facility at times. But in this circumstance, I believe it was just one of the other Princetons.
Yeah, it said he died at home, but maybe his home was not in Princeton.
I don't believe that's actually in Princeton, or in this Princeton. The other question regarding 6-foot distance, I know that the guidance out there is regarding the 6-foot rule, and that's been what's been provided really since the onset of this. Maintain social distance, maintain 6 feet. I too believe whether you're a heavy breather or you're a jogger, you're exerting yourself aerobically, that the potential for beyond 6-foot spread could be present. So whenever people are jogging or biking, the questions come up to us a few times by different organizations, and we just tell people, when you're jogging, 6 foot may not be enough, so just maintain more than 6 feet. That's information that we need to work on, obviously in the springtime and the summertime, as more people are getting outside, because the opportunity for spread is there. And from what I've heard, wearing a mask is not too comfortable when you're jogging. So we want to make sure people are comfortably jogging and doing so safely.
Great, thanks. Ms. Fraga, did you have a question?
I did. So first, I wanted to echo everyone's gratitude, Jeff, for all that you're doing. And thank you very much. And you and everyone on Board of Health and Chief Sutter and all first responders. My question is related to the executive order requiring face coverings. What action, if any, are we taking, whether it's the health department or public safety, when somebody's not following that, whether it's a retailer? Because I still, maybe today's different, but I've still seen folks, many folks wearing face coverings, but there's still some that don't.
So first and foremost, it's a great question. I think for anyone that sees somebody that's not wearing one, if they're comfortable with it or it's being done so in a community setting where they should be wearing one, the first call should be to the police department, and they're going out and they're trying to educate the community. And they're assuming that people don't know about it first. And if they don't know about it, then they advise them to get one. I know Chief Sutter is pretty good at trying to handle these things with his department without getting into an altercation. So I think they're going to try to maintain that. All I can also say to the residents is, if they're having a hard time finding masks, please contact our office. There's a number of different community stakeholders. Obviously, the Arts Council is one of them that they're making these masks, and we'll assist with the distribution as much as possible. Last week, we worked with Liliana on distributing, I want to say, upwards of 300 masks to individuals that needed them. So we're happy to help, and we're assuming that people don't have them if they're in the community not wearing them. And again, if it's being done so in a way that people feel like it's just being done on purpose, contact the police department and they'll do their best to educate.
Yes, and I've received these calls too as well from individuals who are just want to know where they can get a face covering. Though my question too was related to, is anyone being prohibited, for example, from being, and it's more of a concern, is someone being kept out of, let's say, McCaffrey's for not wearing face covering?
I know I've started to hear about that from certain businesses, that they're not allowing people in if they're not wearing them. I'm hopeful that we can get to a point where we can do some, safe donations of these masks to these locations. So if people get to the store, we've all been there, I'm sure, in the last few days. If you show up to a store, you're like, oh shoot, where's my mask? Right. We'll have those masks available for those retailers. The retailers have been pretty good about coming to us with things that they need. And I want to say that, as a municipality and first responders, we've been pretty good about allocating the resources, even though there's few, to get to these retailers, understanding that there's only a few in town that are operating, that are doing a huge service to the town.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people that are putting themselves in harm's way. So the least we can all do is try to protect them.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just to that note, there was a question that came in on the Q&A from Kip Cherry. Would it be possible to put a simple cloth mask pattern on the website? I did a quick web search, but didn't find anything clear with simple dimensions.
Yeah, so that's a problem. It's not easy to find, so we have to make sure that that's easy to find.
Yeah, so there's, I would say there's two places to look. So one is if you go to the Princeton Arts Council page, and if you look at there's so many masks initiative, that will take you to a pattern, and you can either go directly to the Arts Council site. You can also find it on the Princeton COVID.website. Under staying at home, there's something on ways to help. And if you look under volunteer, that also has some information from the different local mask making projects. So there's the Arts Council project, and then there's another one called the Mercer Mask Making Project. I know that the Arts Council is using the design that was the New York Times published a couple weeks ago, so you can also probably find it on the New York Times page also. Ms. Fraga?
Yes, I just wanted to add that I'm working, hopefully by tomorrow, put together a video instructions on how to put together a note, one that does not require sewing, and record it in Spanish for members of our community who may want to follow in need of a face covering. I guess I could do it bilingual if needed.
Great, thank you. Mr. Williamson?
Yeah, one of my hybrid concerns and questions. I've been reading that a lot of the, the self-made masks, et cetera, they don't provide the same protection, of course. And as, let's say, industrially produced masks by people who scientifically know what type of layers need to be put in there with the correct type of materials, et cetera. So that being said, I brought this to the mayor's attention and a couple other people's attention. A few days ago, I got a call from a importer who wants to bring in, let's say, millions of surgical masks. Of course, the ones that are FDA approved, we want to first give to first responders and people who are hospital staff members. And in fact, and I know we were talking about, we being the federal government was talking about relaxing some of the FDA rules so they can get a lot of these masks to the first responders and hospital staff members faster. But the question part is in the new normal. I'm wondering what the municipality can do and what should be expected over the next few months about, let's say, mass distribution of masks that actually do filter better, that are more comfortable, probably healthier to wear than a bandana with rubber bands. And just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
No, that's a great question. It sounds like actually it's a point of planning for the next 6, 7, 8 months as we see things develop. I think as a lot of this equipment starts rolling out to medical or home healthcare workers, and they have enough of what they need, I think more of it will go beyond first responders and healthcare workers to the public. And I think the public will notice the fact that where cloth masks are nice, there might be more protection with the surgical mask. Not only from spreading it, but then even the possibility of, just comfort. And I think what's important to note is that right now, I think the cloth masks are an interim guidance to assist with the shortcomings of the supplies for the healthcare workers and the first responders. So I think in the future, you'll probably see the new norm will be surgical masks that people wear, just because, again, of comfort. Also, what people need to understand though about surgical masks are they're usually not reusable. So if people want to stay green, they can wash their cloth masks. And there is, as much as there is argument's sake over who can spread what with cloth masks, there is still a reduction of your respiratory droplets that actually make their way out of a mask, cloth or not. Different material will probably present itself. I'm sure you'll probably see sales for different types of materials that are better, that you can wash, that reduce the disease transmission. I think for now, it's easy to say that cloth masks are here. How long they stay around, I'm not entirely sure. But I have to say it's reassuring to see how many people are abiding by it. I know there's going to be people that don't jump on board right away. There's going to be issues, here and there. But for the most part, we're seeing the majority of the public wearing these masks, and that's reassuring to know that people know that that's the purpose of them wearing them, is to avoid spreading disease to somebody else. Knowing that they know that and they don't want to spread to somebody else, that makes me feel a lot better in terms of the communications that we're going out trying to save and help people out.
Thanks.
I muted myself. Are there any other questions for Mr. Grosser? All right, I just, again, want to reiterate our thanks and thank you for your strategic thinking on this. And I think there's any hopeful news, the governor announced today that there's a multi-state consortium here on the East Coast that are starting to look at what does this look like coming out of coming out of the lockdown, and how do we start to reopen in a safe way. And as Jeff said, I think so much of that is probably going to be related back to what our health department has already been doing with contact tracing and building the network of people who can do that. So I just want to thank Jeff for his forward thinking on that, and for engaging other community partners like the schools on helping to bolster our ability to do that effectively. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
And we're here to support you with whatever you need.
I feel that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, now we come to council reports, and we'll start with Mr. Cohen. Any reports? Oh, you're muted, David.
Thank you. I have a quick report from the Bicycle Advisory Committee. They have been working, even during the shutdown, on updating the bicycle map, and it's just about ready to be reprinted. We've reached out to the university to find out whether their print shop is open, because they've printed past editions. And that is one of the casualties of their shutdown. So we're going to have to hold off on the actual reprinting, but I just wanted to let everyone know that was underway. There are a bunch of spring events that have been canceled or postponed. All of the school Safe Routes to School, Bike and Walk to School Days, Communiversity, Green Fest. We were going to provide bike valet parking, and that's not happening. The big exciting fundraising ride from New York to Philadelphia that was going to overnight in Princeton. They're looking to reschedule that in the fall. Wheels Rodeo, Ciclovia, and Chasing George. Again, we're looking at rescheduling. And we had been talking about an in-town Ciclovia in September. That now conflicts with the date that Greenfest has been rescheduled for. We're not sure whether they can both occur on the same day or not. So that's something that's up in the air. And the committee is ready to start meeting again virtually, and very much looking forward to getting the authorization to do that from the administration, from council, whoever has to make that decision. They're ready to go. And I know Mark is working on scheduling a meeting with all the BCC chairs just to give them guidance about how to do that. And that's hopefully happening later this week.
Thank you. Ms. Fraga, any reports?
No reports.
Ms. Niedergang?
No real reports, but I did want to convey a suggestion I got from a resident that Princeton consider something as being done in cities in Italy and New York, which is to have a moment every night for people to express their connection to the community and their support of our first responders and our healthcare workers. So I'd love to, I don't know if this is the appropriate moment, but just get a sense of whether other people think this would be an idea to pursue, and how we might go about doing that.
I think it's a great idea. I've heard that too. And my suggestion would be, if there's support on council, that we reach out to our own personal networks and other neighborhood groups, and we try to start it up. I think the main thing is picking a time.
Her suggestion was 7, for what it's worth.
Okay, well, that sounds like are there nods from other folks that we want to try to encourage this? Okay, great. All right. Sounds good. Great suggestion. All right, Mr. Williamson?
Nothing to add.
Okay, Ms. Brown-Lambros? Nope, okay, and Ms. Sachs, any reports?
Yeah, not a report per se, but just a couple of things. I think people in the community have asked questions about, you know, when and how the certain functions of the municipality will be up and running, and in particular planning and zoning. So I just want to let everyone know that we're working on that. The planning board had a dry run through using Zoom technology last week that Councilman Cohen tells me went very well. There was guidance from the state, from DCA, which gave some directions about how to proceed. So we're working through with our attorneys to figure out how to implement those directions. I just wanted to mention again this week the daily newsletter update that the municipality is putting out now, which provides essential information and particularly health and safety information. And so if you're not already subscribed to it, there's a link on the Princeton COVID site and also on the municipal website to join, to sign up for that. And then in terms of messaging, there was some concerns. We discussed at the last meeting, and there have been some concerns about the use of our Nixle technology and whether we're using it widely enough or too widely, or, you know, and so we've been looking into that, and we are going to focus on using that for health and safety messaging more specifically in the way that some of the other nearby municipalities have been using their Nixle technology. So that's stay tuned for that. So those are my updates.
Great, thank you. I wanted to let everybody know about a virtual town hall that Trinity Counseling Service is putting on. One of the aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic has been its impact on people's mental health and general levels of anxiety and stress. This virtual town hall is an opportunity to connect with experts to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on daily life. And the panelists will also answer questions live during the discussion. So that's going to be this Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. And you can find more details about it on the princetoncovid.org website. And I do want to let people know, I think this is a new feature since we had our last council meeting, which is a virtual calendar, which is a really wonderful feature. And there are tons of virtual events that are available for if you have kids that you're trying to entertain, or if you just want to be connected. Labyrinth is having some live book readings and book talks on there, and the calendar continues to grow. So if you're a resident who's interested in finding out what's going on, I definitely highly recommend going to check out the virtual calendar. If you're an organization that has local events, that local virtual events that you'd like posted, please also go there, and there's the option to submit an event to get it posted on the calendar. So it's a great community resource to have during this time. So I wanted to put in a plug for that. And then I've also heard just through the grapevine that, you know, while most everybody has been doing a really great job in Princeton, and we're really thankful that people are taking the stay-at-home order seriously and staying at home and practicing social distancing. There are people who are not doing that and who are continuing to socialize. This past week was spring break, stories of kids having sleepovers, and this behavior, it impacts all of us, and it extends potentially the amount of time we all have to be in lockdown. And, you know, as we've heard from some of the really awful parts of Jeff's report, that people can be asymptomatic carriers. So even if you feel fine and don't think you're sick, you can still be infecting other people and spreading this disease. So I just can't stress the importance enough of staying at home. That means not having friends over to your home. And it means taking all of the executive orders that are coming down from the state level seriously, because we are in a public health emergency and we all need to do our part. So most everybody is doing their part, and it's really challenging many days. So I want to thank everybody for doing that, and just implore the folks who aren't to please start taking this seriously, because it's really damaging to all of us if not everyone's doing their part. Okay, and are there any other staff reports?
No, Mayor.
Yep.
No,
Mr.
Mayor.
Shield?
Nope.
No, okay. Okay, then we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by single vote. There are 5 items on the consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? And if not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move.
Moved by Ms. Fraga. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All
Aye.
right, the consent agenda passes unanimously, if not in unison. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mayor, I'm sorry, did the bills and claims, that was part of the consent
It was.
agenda? Okay, got it. Sorry, I must have skipped a page. Thank you.
Yep, all right.
So
Um,
I'll second the motion to.
I think it's already been adjourned. You just have to vote to adjourn.
I so vote.
Okay, so now it is unanimous. All
Mayor,
right, the
who
meeting is
second-
adjourned.
Who
So
seconded?
it is seconded by Mr. Williamson.
Thank you.
All right,
Good evening.
the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.